The essay, The First Atom Bomb by Marcel Junod, recounts the trails of destruction left behind by the dropping of the first atom bomb in Hiroshima on 6th of August 1945. It talks about the aftermath of the explosion of the atomic bomb and the horror in the eyes of both the Americans and the Japanese. The way Marcel Junod explains about the situation in his essay is like, Second World War is going on and the Japanese are attacking all over the world, and by 1944 they even reached Nagaland, Kohima. The Americans, along with the other Allied forces, were fighting against the Japanese troops, some people protesting against the war, and while the others, like the doctors and the nurses and the volunteers along with the Red Cross, were trying to save people, while some other people like the scientists were warning about the effects that an atomic bomb can bring. But the whole world fell into dead silence when on 6th August 1945, when the US aircraft dropped the first atom bomb on Hiroshima. It was called the most barbarous act in human history, which was a great destruction of the supreme value of life and human blood. The whole world was stunned and shocked. Before dropping of the bomb, the dangerous effect and its extraordinary power of the atomic bomb was broadcasted all over the media. But after the bombing, the media was silent, government was silent, and the only thing that people could remember was the advance warning, the warning that for 70 years at least, the radioactivity around the scene of explosion will prevent any form of life from existing there. Now, Marcel Junod was also a doctor from Switzerland, a Swiss doctor. And before getting on board on Benevolence, the hospital ship to go and help the people of Hiroshima or the people who were injured there, he wanted to know a little bit about Hiroshima, about the past of Hiroshima. But whenever he tried to inquire, even the word Hiroshima made the American people feel an undefinable sense of discomfort. There was nowhere he could get information, because even the journalist who went near Hiroshima, the place of destruction, the information that they brought remained confidential under the hands of the military and scientists. Not only the Americans, but even the Japanese remained completely silent about what happened that day. It struck the very heart of their pride, and it brought the Japanese down to a sudden defeat. The Japanese newspaper described a little surface story about the overall event, but no one dared to bring out the in-depth details. Nohara, one of their scientists, a Japanese who was half Japanese, heard rumors from people in Japan saying that the disaster was like a typhoon or a cyclone of glare, heat, and wind which swept away everything, leaving a sea of fire behind it. No one knew the exact number of deaths. Some said 50,000, some said 2 lakhs. Even those people who did not die during explosion were starting to die after 20 or 30 days, dying with strange, undefinable symptoms. Finally, on 1st September, after 25 days of the explosion, Marcel Junod received some photographs of the destroyed area from the Gaimucho, which means the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. The essayist Marcel Junod saw the pictures and he described it as it looked like the picture of the historical destruction of the city of Pompeii by the volcanic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. The destruction of Pompeii is regarded as one of the most horrific natural disaster. But Marcel Junod says that this destruction of Hiroshima was far worse than Pompeii's destruction. Junod was at Marunouchi headquarters to find information about the transportation of the World War II prisoners. There were 6 delegates who went to bring the World War II prisoners, and Bilfinger was one of them. He was particularly waiting for Bilfinger because he had gone very near to Hiroshima. Bilfinger sent an emergency telegram, and in his report of the devastation, he wrote in the telegram that the situation was horrifying. 90% of the town was burned down. Hiroshima hospitals were destroyed. Bomb effect was mysterious. Victimized patients would look like they were recovering and suddenly collapse because of rapid degeneration of white corpuscles in their white blood cells, or succumb to other internal injuries. There were shortage of graves, materials, medicines, and surgical instruments. And lastly, he requested for urgent emergency supplies to be parachuted immediately, like bandages, cotton wool, ointment for burns, sulfamates, blood plasma, transfusion kits, etc. Now, as soon as he received these photographs from the Gaimucho and the telegram from Bilfinger, he immediately gave it to the officers and General MacArthur in Yokohama Chamber of Commerce. The officers there looked at the pictures and the telegram and were speechless. They permitted about 50 tons of medicaments and hospital materials to be distributed under the aegis of the Red Cross. Marcel Junod was allowed to fly with them to Hiroshima. They reached Miyajima Island, and on their way in a car, he sat between two Japanese interpreters, Miss Ito, who was born in Canada, and another journalist who had lived in US for 20 years. They gave him required information about the past activities and the geographical situation of Hiroshima. Miss Ito was wearing a blue kimono and explained that Hiroshima meant a broad island. It was built on the delta of the river Ota, which flows down to Kamuri. It had a population of around 250,000 people and 150,000 soldiers. The other journalist explained that the town had some minor raids earlier. There was a minor raid on 19th March by a squadron of American naval planes, and on 30th April by a flying fortress. But on 6th August 1945, the sky was clear and visibility was almost perfect for 10 to 12 miles. At 7:09 in the morning, an air raid warning was sounded and people ran for shelter. 4 American B-29 planes appeared. Now, B-29 planes are US heavy bomber planes. 4 of them appeared, 2 of them turned towards Shoho Sea and disappeared. The other 2 circled around the neighborhood of Shukai and flew towards Bingo Sea. At around 7:31, people thought it was safe to come out, and then they came out and went about with their daily business. But all of a sudden, a whitish pinkish light appeared in the sky, accompanied by an unnatural tremor, like an earthquake, and a wave of suffocating heat wind that swept away everything. Within few seconds, thousands were burned in the streets, instantly killing many and others screaming in agony. Even large, gigantic houses and walls and factories were annihilated. Trains and buses flung in the air like toys. Even people who did not die instantly died 20 or 30 days later because of the effect of the harmful gamma rays. Half an hour later in Hiroshima, after the explosion, it is said that there was a light shower followed by a heavy storm and wind that spread the fire and burned down the Japanese houses, which were made of timber and straw, and Hiroshima ceased to exist. After getting all this information from Miss Ito and the journalist, they finally reached the explosion area. Marcel says that when he got out of the car and saw the explosion area, there was absolute silence. No one was alive. There was no survivor. It felt like a necropolis, a graveyard. No humans, no birds, no animals, just a group of soldiers inspecting the debris. Professor Tsusuki, a leading surgeon in Japan, spoke loudly so that they would hear, and when he spoke, his voice was filled with emotions. He said, "We must open our eyes. We must try and understand everything. There was a hospital here, gentlemen. 200 beds, 8 doctors, and 20 nurses. Every single one and all the patients were killed." That's what an atomic bomb does. After his service in Japan, when the essayist Marcel Junod was still in Tokyo and was about to leave, he met General MacArthur, a very decorated American military officer, the chief architect of the victory in the Pacific. He said, "The supreme value of human life and human blood has been forgotten, and human dignity too." And though General MacArthur was a professional soldier himself who led the Allied forces in the Pacific theater, he expressed his belief and opinion that Force is not a solution for man's problems. Force on its own is nothing. It never has the last word. Even with the present weapons of war, a new war would not leave anything worth mentioning. General MacArthur spoke about the dangers of death and destruction in the world. He said that many have been destroyed by this war, this Second World War. And the physical exhaustion is too great. The world is too tired to wage another war for the next 20 to 25 years. He meant that now people all over the world understood the dangers that we bring on ourselves through war. General MacArthur said that we have learned a great lesson as of now, but after 20 to 25 years, we will soon forget and repeat the same mistake unless we teach and educate the future generation to save mankind from itself. Because all these destructions and devastations that are caused on mankind is by mankind. So through this essay, Marcel Junod wants to point out the fact that after the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, no matter which country becomes victorious, at the end of the day, it is us, mankind, who suffers. That was the lesson, The First Atom Bomb by Marcel Junod. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.